I believe a lot of things. Having come from Caracas, worked in Caracas over 30 years, now only recently migrated up to the European universities. It's a great luxury to have now the capacity to work with industry, to work with financing, funding from real important institutions. For many years, we had no financing whatsoever. We worked like a dog on the street. In the gutters. So in that sense, TRANSSOLAR, and this is my short homage, TRANSSOLAR, when we were nobody, we gave a call. We wanted to build a cable car on a mountain on 70,000 favela dwellers that could be influenced by 5 stations. And so we called up TRANSSOLAR and we got Thomas Auer on the phone. And Thomas said, listen, just come and I invite you to Stuttgart. So we came, we played a lot of mini foot, because they have a little mini football table in the office, and we talked about how development could be done in the third world. And this is the story I really want to say today. I don't know if I can change from here, yeah? Okay. So we go forward. So the question is, what kind of cities, it's not working. There we go. What kind of cities are you guys all thinking about? Because most of the growth of cities will happen in the south. As we saw today, the climate's good, so why don't we just move down there, right? That would be ideal. And the living is easy. But most of the cities actually will grow not only in the south, but will grow in slums. So when we brought this whole topic of favela architecture, or this Parisopolis, and we compare it to the modern city we're building, we find some very odd things happening. We find that the favela dwellers and the cities built like secondary cities, they've gotten so big that now it's a topic. Sao Paulo has 1,300 favelas in the middle of the city embedded, and Rio has 1,100 favelas. And how do they work? So we started to examine. There was no curriculum for this in universities. There was no mapping ever done, and my colleagues in Caracas said to me, why do you want to go up there? There's no market up there. Of course there's a market. It's an untapped market. But the real question is, how do we bring things to this market? Because as we heard this morning, the technologies do not fit. So even the cable cars that we eventually, I'll show you today a few pictures, the cable cars that we did design together with Doppelmayr, who financed our project phase, the cable cars are much too expensive. So why don't we just have a chicken coop going up on a wire, right? But so we really have to redesign, industry has to rethink its products for the South. You heard a lot of that today. But what I'm most interested about is why the morphology of these secondary cities is so uniform. Why? Because they build with a unit, the brick size. They know that a concrete beam is 5 meters. They can build it themselves. It's like Heidegger. You guys are from the land of Heidegger, right? You know, from the Black Mountain, from the Black Forest. And Heidegger said we all have to get in touch with the process of building and feeding ourselves and thinking about who we are in this world. Let me just continue. So I'm going to go rapid fire with some ideas just to throw it out there, and hopefully we can have a discussion with my colleagues. It's about building trust among each other. How do we build trust? I think city development is all wrong. I think it should not be in the hands of single developers and a piecemeal process. I think that's what's going to ruin the rest of cities. You know, do you think cities are getting better? Well, maybe some Western capital, global capital cities are getting better, but most of the cities now, as development comes to the global South, are getting worse. So for that we created this magazine. This is the issue that I'm actually talking about today, is Last Round. It's the last round ecology. Because before we used to think in the 19th century, 18th century about ecology in terms of classification charts, the Naturae Scientifica, you know, and today we have to think about the family of ecology, right? So what are the things that you do that affect others, and how do we get together? So here you thought that a Mexican was the sleepy old guy with a big sombrero. I wish Stephen had been here, because Stephen actually likes to quote Wallace Stevens that talks about the sombrero. But I think it's changed in the 80s, and you had Scarface, the Latino became the gunslinging guy. But now we actually are trying to bring a new ideology to South America, which is this kind of cross between a Mexican wrestler and Swiss flag. So just to give you an idea who I am, what I'm trying to do, we're trying to hybrid. I believe in hybridization. I don't believe in centralized systems. I'm a little scared of centralized power stations. So I really believe in rhizomatic, little small rhizomatic energy stations. But with this, I bring you an idea of Estética da Ginja. Oiticica is a great Brazilian artist. What Oiticica did was he looked at the favelas, he looked how people joined, how there was more trust, more community, more development, more uniformity, more sense of city. And he talked about something called urban parangolé. And parangolé is really the body movement. It's the space between the clothes we wear and the people we are and our bodies. So he really investigated that by designing some costumes that people would walk around in the city with. But I bring Oiticica to say we have to seek outside of our limited scope of thinking and go to artists, go to musicians, go to community leaders, and really bring in the knowledge back into our profession. So he says, before anything else, it's necessary to clarify my interest for dance, for rhythm. In particular case, it came from a vital necessity for disintellectualization. The idea is, let's get, I would say, less stupid. Because by trying to put on so many principles, so many rules in society and cities, and to centralize this old Enlightenment idea that we can reason our way to things, I actually believe we can't reason our way to things. We can't see the totality anymore, and all we can do is work on rhizomatic centers, local centers, even better. So what is this new city? I'm going to take you through. This is a street in Caracas where informal vending, this is the movement that happens. How can you think of cities without informal vendors? But you have none here. But wouldn't it be fun if Stuttgart had lots of a circus all the time running all around, right? It would make the city lively. We would talk to people. We'd engage people. So cities want to eradicate informal vending. I say we just have to rethink it. We have to rethink how it works, who runs it, and what goes on. Maybe we declare certain city zones. And this is what we call these new scales, these modes of mobility. Maybe we can rethink collective mobility. Maybe we can rethink the use of the surface of cities. We can rethink how we navigate the city. Obviously with the GPS now, cities don't have to be square. They don't have to be gridded. Cities don't need to be that way. We can navigate cities. In fact, the most expensive part of Paris is Saint-Germain-des-Prés, the only part that Haussmann didn't touch, right? So we call this idea urban parangolé, which is the city of the and, and the and, right? Here we're looking at downtown Sao Paulo. I just show you a map of kind of the bus stations, the transportations, the big train line coming in. That's the city center. And what we want to say is we want to declare, at least in one part, the center of cities combustion car free. So maybe we have a system like in Hong Kong of little free buses, and we could call this Freetown, right? And the idea is we would connect the hubs, and between the hubs of train, bus, etc., you would have rickshaws, informal vendors. You don't have to drive any electric cars anymore. Forget that. Audi, BMW, Mercedes, they can all have little rickshaws driven by people, and they can manage the whole system, right? Here you see the two ring roads. So this is old thinking of how cities work, all in rings, right? And actually those rings become incredible obstacles, and we have to somehow go through those obstacles. Yeah, so this is the zone between those hubs. How would you determine these hubs, right? This is the gridded generic city we're working on to think about this. Of maybe these gridded cities or these gridded pods are like urban villages, and they plug onto a bigger, larger infrastructure hub. I'm sure you've seen it before, but why did we come to this? Because Sao Paulo is so big. 20 million metropolis that you could not possibly plan for it. It has more than 50 occupied buildings, squatted buildings. So just to tell you how governance is also a big issue. So if we start to free up our obsession with governance, maybe we can create a toolbox. The idea is that why are we here today? We're here to form part of this chart. This chart is actually interested people who are working together to form new ideas. We have to be less stupid, as I said. But to be less stupid, to experiment, we have to say things that are incoherent. So forgive me for any incoherence today, but we actually have to try and reach beyond and say dumb things, because only that way will we get some new ideas. So this is a little bit of our new book that we're working on. This is the drafts. So diagnose topography, number one. Visualize social factors. Diagnose the morphology. Reverse engineer aggregation. So let's look at the city the way it is and let's reverse engineer it, right? Capture the resources that are obviously available. Sao Paulo floods every year. Add infrastructure, of course. Plug in the infrastructure. Capture unused spaces. Make a kit of parts. Consolidate the public. Because the real thing, why are we designing cities? It's for people. In fact, I actually think that office buildings will be obsolete soon. Because how many of us really like to go to offices? In the future, we'll be working in a cafe, in a Starbucks, in a park, in a public space that is all set up for us to work. So I really think that we're going to have a lot of opportunities now. Goodbye, Dubai. But we can retrofit all of those towers into social housing. Because what we really have to do now is rethink the city for the people. We heard it today. 1 billion people living in poverty. And that's going to escalate 2030 to 2 billion people. That's already been estimated by the United Nations, right? So how do we address that? I want to live my life with some sense of sense of why I was in this world. It's obviously not to make money, because I haven't made much money, but maybe we could have an impact by bringing together city development, by bringing the mayors together with universities, together with professionals, and create a new way in which cities are developed by trust, and land and parcels and open space and tops of office buildings can share and get incentives to share among each other to produce the energy and the resources we need. So I'll continue prefabricate, and maybe with this, I've got 3 minutes left. So this is Mexico City. This is the greatest square, El Zócalo of Mexico City. It is in protest since the day it was built. 500 years, people have been squatting that square and speaking out their voices. We need to be able to speak out our voices. We need to break down those barriers of bureaucracy, of politicians. We need to get more engaged in politicians. And it is not a coincidence that Jaime Lerner, architect of Curitiba, from Curitiba, Brazil, became the mayor, became the governor, and actually he changed radically the way Curitiba functioned by creating incentives that if you picked up your trash and brought it to another location, you got a free bus ride. So I think we have to rethink the way cities work in the developing world. Of course, I won't even. So this is the city that exists. What did T.S. Eliot say? The future is the past in the present, right? So the future city is actually already there. There you see it, the Velo little push pedals, you see the street vendors, you see a preacher, and you see the protest in the back. This is what I imagine the new city to be more like, because most of the cities will not look like the global European capitals. So I take you to Science City. When we began the Urban Think Tank, actually we started it with a good friend of Stephen Hall's, which is Andrew McNair on the right. We were just a bunch of kids, we still are, and now we're just a little more sophisticated. Now we have raincoats and a little more professional look. But what we want to do is to create this online website. Of course, Daniel will talk more about how things get open source so that we can really compare cities. We can look at them, what they mean. We can see how they grow over time. And we can understand, interpret, act, and identify with a little bit more clarity. So what we've been doing at ETH is we've been looking at some of those cities. We've been seeing when the car came in, when microplanning, informal toolbox, shrinking cities, land reclamation, and we see how those cities have changed. We plot them out and we start to learn from them. But now I end with function sometimes doesn't follow form. And what you have here is you have housing blocks, 48 housing blocks. So it's Carlos Raúl Villanueva. He thought in the modernization, social housing like boxes. But of course, he was missing all of the social aspect. Where do you wash your clothes? Where do you eat? All of that was out of the modern city. So what went in was this layer of urbanism, of favela urbanism that squatted all the open spaces. And this today is the urbanization that best works in Caracas. It's kind of a combination between informal housing and formal housing. So I believe in this combination between certain infrastructure lines, certain formality, where architects can work on a bigger scale, and then leaving up the freedom. Does anyone here know Jaipur? Yes, Raul does, and I'm sure a few more do. But Jaipur, 16th century, laid out a grid that was something like 600 meters. Not like the ones in Savannah that were 60 meters long, Savannah, Georgia. 600 meters, just 4 squares. Why? So that everyone could get a public house, a house on the street. But what did they do on the interior of the block? They let it grow. And if you look at the plan of Jaipur today, you won't even see this superstructure very clearly, because you'll be walking through the natural growth patterns. Now, how do developers work in that? Well, that's a whole nother story. How do banks work in there? Microfinance, that's another story. So with that, I leave you with the tallest squatted tower. And if you have any doubts that what I'm saying is true, you're going to see this happening more and more. This is the tallest concrete tower in Caracas. It's squatted by 3,000 people. They built infrastructure. They built out their apartments themselves. And I take you just quickly through that. And we've plotted out, this is a new book coming out, and this is the object of our Venice Biennale show this summer, how they've brought water and resources, electricity into the tower, and in a do-it-yourself, they even paid off the electrical bill that the old developer had left on the tower. And they built out each apartment unit, and there you see them building more. I'm not saying, and they have little stores, shops, workout sessions, they produce inside. What I'm saying is this is not ideal. But can we rethink cities so we have more of this coherence and more social interaction? With that I end. Thank you very much.